What's going on, guys? This is the Elder Troll. There's been quite a long time since I've last made a video. I believe that before I was the Raging Cow, I was the Raging Mollusk, I was all over the place, but I am the Elder Troll now. It's been 4 years since I've last made a video, but that doesn't really matter today. Today I wanted to talk about a little issue which I have been having with a game that I've been playing for quite a long time now. I have about 2,000 hours in Dota 2. So before I can talk about this issue, though, it's probably beneficial for you to understand the game, at least to some degree. So, let's talk about what Dota 2 is. Dota 2 is a 5v5 MOBA strategy/action game. I suppose that's the best way of describing it. And it is quite a lot of fun. Basically, the objective is you are in a lane, and you need to take that tower, take the subsequent tower, the tower following that, and then eventually the T4 towers, to be able to take the enemy ancient. That is the entire game purpose of the game itself. It is called Dota 2. It is actually an acronym standing for Defense of the Ancients, and once the enemy ancient has fallen, the game has been won. So, a little problem with this game, though, is the amount of toxicity that exists within the community. It has, like, for a long time now, I've noticed that it far exceeds any other toxicity which I've found in any community ever. It is immense, the toxicity in this game. It is quite disgusting. It is almost disturbing. And to some extent, I believe I have figured out how this toxicity has come about. So, let's define toxicity itself. Toxicity is essentially any means of enemy players or teammates flaming you or being disrespectful, rude, abusing the communications, just feeding the enemy team, disrupting the game, and just preventing you from having a fun time, essentially. Obviously, the purpose of any game is to have fun, and if you have teammates which are constantly being toxic and rendering whatever you do pointless or useless, then the game is not going to be very fun, and your experience, if it was positive at all, is not going to be that way anymore. So, now that we have this definition, I could explain how I believe this toxicity has developed within such a large community. I believe that this problem is primarily based within the fact that Dota 2 is a free-to-play game, and because of this, even though that there's a report system which exists within the game and gives players incentive to behave well within ranked matchmaking, they don't really care because the repercussions are minimal. If they do get to a point where they're constantly in a low priority or permanently banned on communications, then they can simply make a new account, reinstall Dota 2, or not even reinstall it would already be installed, and they're good to go. And to me, that's pretty disgusting to know that that's all that it takes, and it doesn't really give the players any incentive to behave properly. So, what I've been thinking about is that this report system needs to be reworked. Essentially, the report system which we have currently within the game, you can click a player and report them. There are 3 main reasons to report, which are labeled in the reporting system. The first one is, I'm not even sure of the order actually, but I'll just read them off in the order which I remember them. One of them is feeding, which, as I've explained earlier, is just supplying the enemies with gold by any ways as you can, which the most common method would just be running down the lane, getting killed by towers, getting killed by enemies, or just generally feeding your teammates, like somehow by trapping them or whatnot, and allowing the enemies to kill them, which gives them gold and experience and makes the game substantially harder for yourself. The second way would be communication abuse, the second report, rather. This would be in the form of just enemies constantly saying that you suck, your teammates saying that you suck, just constantly pinging, constantly spamming certain voice commands, or anything like that. Communication abuse of any kind is a reportable offense, and if it comes up often enough, you can be sent to the low priority, which is something I'm going to discuss in a little bit. And the last report offense is just for ability abuse, and this would just be using your abilities to the detriment of your own team or the detriment of yourself, and it's quite self-explanatory from there. So yeah, basically, if you get reported often enough in Dota 2, you'll be sent to a low priority pool, which essentially you have to play games that are unranked, and you have to win. Usually it's around 3 to 5 games, depending on how often you've been reported and how many times you've been to the low priority queue. But basically, you're forced to play with a bunch of players that have been just as big of a douchebag as you, and you're just eventually going to have to win these games, and it's very difficult and it's not fun. Nobody enjoys being there. It fucking sucks. So a large portion of these reports that will come in for you they're just completely used incorrectly. The most common thing that I found in Dota 2 is that people just don't seem to understand how the report system is supposed to function. You'll see it constantly throughout the game. I play this game for 2,000 hours, like I've said. I've had quite a bit of experience in ranked matchmaking, but I'm not very good at the game, but that doesn't really matter. I can still remark upon how the community is. So, what I've noticed is that a lot of people, specifically foreigners, I'm not sure why that is, why foreigners are on the USE servers in the first place, but that's another issue. But basically, they'll just say to report you for doing something bad, and that just basically is incorrect use of the report system. If you are playing poorly, that's your own fault. Like, that's not something that's a reportable offense. You're just having a bad game. Everybody has bad games. The best players in the world have bad games. It's how it is. That's not something to be reported for. And you can still get reported for this and sent to the low priority queue. And it is quite a struggle. And so, what I think is that a lot of the toxicity, like I said, is rooted in this and the incorrect use of the report system. And it's not an effective system, and it needs to be reworked entirely. And so, of course, people will say, yeah, alright, you can mute the players in the game, but within Dota 2, that's quite a problem. You can't really mute your teammates because as much as they might flame you or be terrible people, often enough, you're going to rely upon the information that they provide you with in the game, because it is such a team-based strategy game. So, what I propose is an entire rework of this report system, in which Dota 2 follows a system similar to what is followed in CSGO, known as the Overwatch system. So essentially, instead of having just the standard reports and then just being sent to low priority after a certain number of them are reached, instead we will be seeing a system in which players must first get reported a certain amount of times, and then the match, if they get reported to a certain threshold, then the match in which they were last reported will be sent out to a certain number of players who can then accept reviewing this match, and they will then review the match, and if they determine that the report is justified, then they will say, yeah, this person's an asshole, they need to go to low priority, then they'll be sent to low priority. And that way, anyone who is falsely reported or incorrectly reported will not have to deal with the Overwatch, like, not coming through. They won't have to deal with low priority because the people that are reviewing the game will certainly not send them if they're, like, not, it's not a reliable report. They were not held accountable for what the other people said that they did. So, this would allow for quite a bit of a drop in toxicity, because it will hold players accountable for their actions a lot more, and there won't be as much just random shit going down in low priority. Additionally, if players get to a certain point and they have been in the low priority queue, I don't know, past a certain amount, and it's a repeat offense of, say, let's say, for example, a communication problem, where they get reported for abusing their communications so much. Well, then, after a certain threshold, they should just receive a permanent communication ban. And that is how it should be. This communication ban should be associated with the IP address of either of their home network. So if they attempt to make a new account, that account will also receive a permanent communication ban. I'm not sure how this could work if someone else was also in the house and also had a computer connected to that same home network. Then I'm sure that there's some workaround so that they would not be communication banned on their own computer, but this needs to be figured out to some extent, because it would be a great incentive for everyone to behave in their matches. Everybody would behave. It would be beautiful. And yeah, so this association of the IPs would be fantastic. And also, if, let's say, these players are feeding constantly and they've been to low priority past a certain threshold, then at that point, if you're feeding and abandoning games or whatever it is to such a great extent, then an entire just ban from rank matchmaking should be in place. Because if you're going to be an abusive player and you're going to be terrible to everyone, then why should you be able to go to ranked matchmaking when you consistently demonstrate that you cannot behave yourself and control your own actions? Like, come on, man. So yeah, I mean, that's really all that I have to say for this video. I'm not sure how to implement all of this, like, still quite a bit in place for people to think about and to consider, but I believe that implementing an Overwatch system in Dota 2 is an effective way to lower the toxicity, because I really enjoy this game, and the community is the biggest thing that's been holding me back from playing it. It's quite saddening to go into a ranked matchmaking game and say, like, okay, yeah, sorry I'm having a bad game, and still get flamed, and get told you suck, and get reported, and then you get sent to low priority. That's just not how it should be. Like, it's totally illogical for that to be how things are, and it really could benefit from having a rework of the system. I'm sure that Valve could implement it. I'm sure that there are plenty of people out there that could work upon my ideas and figure things out to a greater extent, but I believe that this is the right direction to go in. So yeah, I guess I will just cut the video there. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.